Thank you, Nicole, and thank you for the European community to give me this opportunity to expose my views. This is, as Nicole said, a common work, and so I really benefit from this exchange with other philosophers and people during this 1 years of this OnLife exercise. So uh, what I wanted to present here is the work I began before the OnLife year, but which really was enriched by this exercise, and many things come from this exchange. And I entitle it "End of Authority" is a great metaphor because there are two things. First is this notion of authority, which I would like to discuss, and I think that with the information technology, the authority was evolving. But maybe I would like to precise that here. Oh, sorry, I was pushing onto that button. So here is the first slide. So this is the overview of the talk. The first point I will precise what I exactly mean by authority. And I would like to be precise. I don't want to say that there is no power, that it's like an anarchist era which begin with new technology. I think there is a strong difference between authority and power. So I will precise this point. Then I will introduce some examples which are a sign of this evolution of this end of authority. I will take three examples, but maybe you can have many other examples. First is Wikipedia. I will explain why. The second is about medicine, and the third about WikiLeaks and the notion of surveillance. I will explain why more in detail. And then I will show a metaphor, which I think is interesting because it can help to understand how this hyperconnectivity is changing the world. And this notion of grid is a parallel architecture, and I will explain why this is very useful. And I will try to conclude to explain why it's important. What are the conclusions for policymaker? Not immediate conclusion, but I think which in the long term I think are important. So first point. Oh, sorry, I push on the bad button. So first, authority, different power. So maybe the first thing is to precise the etymology of authority. Authority comes from the Latin ogere, which means to increase, to make the thing grow up, and the real root is from Indo-European, and it gives some word. It's very surprising. The word August comes from the same roots, which is the month where the wheat and all the things are growing a lot. And it's the same roots as augmentation, something like this. And it gives the word authority, which is also the same root as author. Author is a person who is at the origin, who is the instigator of something. And the idea of authority is power, but not any kind of power. It's legitimate power. And this legitimate power is given by the fact that the people were at the origin of the thing. And we can oppose, not exactly oppose, but we can distinguish it from power. The etymology of power is a very old etymology in Indo-European, which is porsi, which means chief, and then potere in Latin. It is the ability to act, the possession of some controlling influence. But it's not necessary legitimate power. It may be any kind of power. This is the difference. And I think today what happened is that the authority is evolving with new technology, information technology, but it doesn't mean that there is no power. There are other kind of power, and this is the type of things that I would like to precise here, and then I will concrete this. So the second thing I would like to show is the different evidence which show us that there are evolutions. That the notion of authority is now changing. So the first is Wikipedia. What is Wikipedia? I think almost all of you use Wikipedia, because if you are looking for some word with a search engine, you usually you have many chance to get an answer which corresponds to some Wikipedia entry. So what is Wikipedia? Wikipedia is a very interesting encyclopedia. And what is interesting there is that the way this encyclopedia was built is completely different than other encyclopedia were built in the past. So just to be a little bit precise, let's recall how were built the first encyclopedia. So because I am French, there were other encyclopedia in UK, but in case of the French encyclopedia, we can refer to Diderot and D'Alembert Encyclopedia. So I would like to compare the governance of this new Wikipedia encyclopedia to the classical encyclopedia in the modern age. And it's very interesting because you will see it's governance, the way the authority is govern the encyclopedia changed completely. So let's first recall that it took 27 years to write this Diderot and D'Alembert encyclopedia, which is a lot. And the first person who met with the idea to build the encyclopedia, they organized some kind of meeting in 1745. Then the first volume, I think, was printed in 1750, and then it took a long time to get the full encyclopedia. There were 162 contributors, which looks at this time a lot, and 72,000 papers. It also looks at this time a huge work. But what is more interesting for us is that you had three steps. The first step were editors, the people who were the promoter of the encyclopedia. These people were working, and they wanted to contact specialist people, experts, to write paper, and they asked them to they command them some paper. So then the second step was author, who were working under the supervision of editors. And then the third step were reader, which is just to read something, and they had no real possibility to change the content of the paper. They could just comment the paper, but after the encyclopedia was printed. So what happened with Wikipedia? It's very interesting because this encyclopedia began in 2001, and it took maybe a few years, after 10 years, 11 years, and it's continued, it's growing again. But the number of contributors was 77,000. There was more contributor for Wikipedia than a paper of the Diderot and D'Alembert Encyclopedia. And the number of papers is really huge. It's 22 million papers. Which is very impressive. And the number of language in which the paper are written is also huge. There are more than 230 languages. And what is interesting for us, for our purpose now, is the fact that you have a new governance of this encyclopedia, which is not editor, author, and reader, but the fact that reader or author, the reader who want to correct some paper, have the ability to do it, and the author are also readers. So the author are not ordered by the editors. They just declare they want to write something. If they want to read, they want to write what they want to read in the encyclopedia. And to do this, what you have? You have no real authority. This is a kind of authority, but you have a governance. You have some rule, and you have some layer of administrators, and will ensure they don't really correct the papers. They just ensure that the basic rule, which is the neutrality of the author, is respected. It means that author cannot write for themselves; they just write on the topics. And what is important is that they could comment what other wrote, and maybe they could criticize and something like this. And you have also some robots who just are correcting a spelling mistake and something like this. This is a type of thing which is very interesting. This hierarchical authority relation between editor and author is completely changed here. And this is the point on which I would like to insist here. A second thing, which I think is very interesting, is in the domain of medicine. I entitled this part Fortune and Misfortune of Patient Organization. What it means? It means that, maybe some of you remember in the 70s, after 1968, a book which were very famous at this time, written by Ivan Illich, called Nemesis Medical. It means that Ivan Illich was criticizing the medical control and the authority in medicine. He said that the physician had power to impose some kind of social order, and maybe also that the health industry was playing a very bad role in this organization. So what wanted Ivan Illich? He wanted to have something which is, he called it health-oriented medicine, not an industry-oriented medicine. And to do this, he wanted that the patient take part to the decision. So a few years later, what happened? You had some new organization of the medicine where you had some patient organization which played active role in the decision. For instance, when you decide to pursue research in some domain, the patient organization can play a role when you decide to distribute some drugs. So the patient organization plays some role. It's an official role. But what is very interesting is that with time, this organization, which was very new and which to criticize the first medical organization dominated by physicians. So this new organization was again problematic because the patient organization became very big and they have their own agenda, and they don't reflect exactly the patient needs. So now what happened with what we call medicine 2.0 with the web 2 is that the patient were not completely, they don't feel completely represented by a patient organization. And so what they did, they tried to have direct contact through the web. It's very interesting because this new organization was chartered by the patients themselves, which changed directly through the web without any organization. So now I will give a third example, which is what I call surveillance. And here, what you see, you remember, it's a logo of WikiLeaks. So what is the idea? It's the idea is that now it's time to open the archive. When I was thinking to this talk, it was a few days ago, but maybe nowadays I could add a new example. You know what happened with Snowden, this young guy who is now in Hong Kong and who revealed some problem with the American government. So what is the idea? Is it with technology, modern technology, everybody has the power to record information. For instance, to record here you have on the slide you have mobile phones, so everybody can use his mobile phone to take a movie, or maybe what a guy whose name is Steve Mann introduced. He called it the I-types. The idea was to help people to record all the information they had. So he worked for a long time on that, and today you have heard about the Google Glass project. The idea is to help to allow people to have those very tiny glasses, and you can, with the glasses, when you want, you can record what you want to record. You can record sound, and you can record picture or video or anything. So why is it is interesting? It is interesting because what said Steve Mann is that with modern information technology, everybody can get and broadcast information. So in the previous world, it was very costly and it required hard, very heavy infrastructure to record information and to diffuse it. And it was, he called it surveillance. It means that people who watch were above. They had a lot of power and a lot of money. And what he says is that today everybody can do this. This is what people call surveillance. And what is interesting here is that some people like Steve Mann said uh, the regime of surveillance were authoritarian regime. It means that you need to have concentrated power to allow surveillance, and the fact that you have surveillance reinforces the authoritarian government. And what say Steve Mann is that with surveillance, with this technology, now you have people can get information and can fight against this authoritarian regime. This is exactly what did Julian Assange with WikiLeaks, and there is this fight against promoter of surveillance and surveillance. And what is very interesting here is the theory of Julian Assange. He says that there is in the regime of surveillance some kind of asymmetry of information. You have people who are recording information, storing information, diffusing information, and using information. And he says that this kind of asymmetry has to be condemned. And in first part of his life, he was trying to help people to hide information to the authoritarian regime. So he was building some cryptographic technique and he was diffusing the cryptographic technique for everybody. Then after, he said, okay, we can also make the everything transparent, not everything about people, everything about powerful people. And so this idea was to inverse the asymmetry of information by promoting this logic of surveillance. And this is exactly what happened today with Snowden. You remember he was revealing the fact that the United States government wanted information from Google, from Facebook, etc. So this is exactly the type of thing which correspond to. So all those examples, I think, are signs of this ending of authority and the fact that this notion of authority now is evolving. So now I will try to use a metaphor to translate and to analyze this kind of thing. And for this, I use something which come from computer science, which is the notion of computer architecture. This is the idea of parallel computer architecture. So before coming into detail, I would like to recall that as Nicole told in the beginning of this talk, we are here in a world in transition, and we start from a classical world of communication where you had few people communicating between them, and where the communication take time. You remember when you were writing a letter, it take time, and then when you were sending a letter, it takes time. So nowadays it is really changing with new technology, and we can say that by analogy with this notion of hyperconductivity, which means that some physical system can transmit electricity very fastly without resistance. So we have here in our world it's the same. So we have this the idea of hyperdiffusibility. It's possible to transmit information very easily in all the world. And in fact, also it's possible to reproduce information very easily. For a long time it was very difficult. When you wanted to reproduce a picture, it was difficult. You had to redraw it, and even with photography, it was faster, but it was not so easy. And now it's really very cheap, and it's with no cost. And we can say also hypercommunicability is the fact that you can communicate all over the world without any resistance. Hypermemorizability, the fact that the amount of storage is really huge, and you can record many information. And hyperstorage, this is the an ocean which was introduced by Luciano Floridi, which is very interesting because it's related to this communication technology and hyperconnectivity and many hypers. So what is interesting, if you want to try to understand from a formal point of view, what does it mean, this notion of hyperconnectivity? The first thing which people develop is that you have network of connection. Everybody is connected to many people. A long time ago, you had maybe 5, 10, 20 friends. Now it's possible to have hundreds of friends and to have many contacts. So you have a network of relation which is very complex, which is huge, and which is also very intricate. And the second thing is that the power relation, authority relation, which were really stratified, very well organized, which correspond to this idea of taxes, now is evolving. So you have this very complex network. So coming to this expression from our work, which were mentioned by one of our colleague in the OnLife OnLife group, Hugo Pagallo. So we can say that we come from Taxis, which is organization, and to Cosmos, which is far more complex. That this is just a topological model of connectivity. It is related with the connection and the network of relation. But there is a second dimension, and this is the thing I would like to insist on it because it's very important, and it's really my point. Is a question of dynamic, because the problem with this complex network is not only the topology, it's dynamic. And to analyze the dynamic, what I propose here, and this is a metaphor I wanted to use, is to reuse this notion of parallel computing. And people who are working in parallel computing distinct different type of architecture. So in technical world, they distinct SISD, which means single instruction, single data. I will show you, but it means that you have many processors, and each processor has the same instruction, the same program, and they are working on the same data. And you may have multiple inscription, single data. It means that you have different processor, and they have different program, and they have the same data. For instance, I will show you example in a few minutes. And the third is what we call single instruction, multiple data. For instance, if you have something which is you want to process some picture, so you have very different data. Each data corresponds to a pixel and maybe to the environment of the pixel. And maybe you have a very efficient processor with multiple processors which are dealing, each is dealing with a small part of the picture, but you can deal with all the picture with all the process. And you may have also multiple instruction and multiple data. And nowadays, we have some new kind of architecture, which is a grid, which is a mixture of a topology, very complex topology, which is similar to what we explained with the Cosmos, which is mesh topology, and on-demand activity, which means that when you need something, you help some processor in this in this topology. So just let me precise the analogy between this social structure of the world, social institution, and this machine architecture. So the first is the notion of agora. So you know all what is the agora? What was the agora in the Greek words, which was this central plaza where people were discussing the law, etc. What is very interesting is that many people today say yes, with the net, we have some kind of digital agora. Everybody will be able to discuss and to take decision on the web. I think it's not realistic because people have no time to spend all they live on the web, and also because the problem is very complex. So from a cognitive point of view, it's far too difficult to do this. But what is interesting is that we can try to see how this agora can be related with this machine architecture. And what we have here, you have, in case I can schematize here with the SISD, which means single instruction and single data. It means that you have many individuals, which is a problem, that they have the same question at a time. They are were all on the same place. They are thinking on the same data. They have the same information. So this is basic machine architecture, and this corresponds to the most simple model. Now you can imagine what is SIMD. It corresponds to some institution where you have the same rule, for instance, in schools or court, etc. So you have in school you have the same program, but you have different students, you have different pupils, and so you have different case. If you're in court and you want to judge with the same rule for everybody, so you have a parallel machine because you have many courts, many schools. But the idea was would be to have the different data in each is particular. Now, I would like to show other institutions which are very interesting. It's very different. It's what is a commission in the National Assembly? The idea is that okay, you have a specialized group of people which works. Each group is working on the same data, but on special direction. For instance, you have some commission on finance, some commission on foreign affairs, some commission on defense, health, etc. So there are multiple instructions because they have multiple background, multiple goals, but the data are common, there are truly data which are common to everybody. And what happened today with this notion of grid, which I introduced, is very new. It's a very interesting machine architecture. There is the idea that you have big institutions which have a lot of computing power, which make it available for everybody in the world. Or maybe some private people have their PC and they agree when they are not working on their PC, which is on the net, that the PC can be used for other purpose. So the idea is that you have a mesh, a huge topology all over the world. It's not a stratified topology. It's not a taxis. It's like the cosmos. And between the different points, you have multiple paths, and it's not natural path. So you have to decide what is the route. So you have some routing algorithm which decide how to connect the different node of this. And what is interesting is that you have on-demand activity because it's not, you have no synchrony. The different machines are not working together, but they are working on demand, and the processors are not special. So this is a type of architecture which I think is a very good metaphor of what happened now in the present society. So to summarize this, I would like to introduce a parallel between the traditional democracy, ancient democracy, and what is this kind of new democracy, which is a little bit complex and which corresponds, I think, to the future. So what is a democracy in a classical way? You have first community. So the community depends, but it means that you have some group of people. In the ancient Greece, it was a city, and in modern state is this idea of nation, and you can extend, maybe you have a group of nation or something like that. The second point is that what you need, you need some kind of assembly. So maybe you can have direct democracy where everybody in the city participates. So it's an assembly of everybody, or maybe you can restrict and you have some kind of representation of the people. And the last point is that you have election which can be election by vote or election to decide who are the represented, etc. What is interesting here is that the first thing is you have different form of restricted suffrage. For instance, in the ancient Greece, it was a democracy. Everybody was participating to this assembly, but in fact, everybody means at this time just men and just free men. So we excluded slaves, we excluded women, we excluded the child, etc. And in modern state, we excluded many people, and now for instance, were including women, but it's not so all. For instance, in France, a woman had the ability to vote just after the Second World War. And what people don't know is that people who were working for the army had not the right to vote until 1945. And also, and it's very important, and Rousseau, for instance, insists on this kind of thing. This is the idea that election has to be synchron. We have to decide exactly the date, it has to be public, and every member of this body of voter has to know when is it. And now what happened with this what I call grid democracy, this grid institution? What is a community? It's an open question because it's not so well defined, because you may have country, but it's not easy to define, because in country you have many people living there who come from other countries but who are living there, so they feel they are now not members of nations. They have not they have not the ability to vote. It's difficult, and maybe so in some case we want to include everybody in the world. So it's this question of community is an open question. What are the community now for the democracy? The second thing, which is very interesting, is what are the representative organizations? So you have the traditional institution, national institution, parliament, etc. But you have also international institution, and you have also what people call stakeholder, non-governmental organization, industry, civil society, I mentioned, patient organization. All this group of people want to participate to this democratic life, which is very interesting in this world, and far more complex than it was before in customs to this cosmos. And you see that it's not only in question of topology, but the fact that it is heterogeneous. And the last point is that the notion of vote is very different, because it's you have not really this notion of restricted suffrage. The idea is that you have universal suffrage. Everybody is able to vote on the board. But what is important also is that the notion of synchrony, which was very important in case of classical democracy, now is changing, and you have some kind of asynchrony. Everybody is able to introduce a new vote at the time he wants, and they can it can influence the policy, which is very important. So now I would like to conclude. I think one of the consequences of this evolution of authority, which is I think very interesting. Remember, when I introduced the notion of authority, I remind that the origin etymology of authority referred to the notion of author. The idea of authority is related to the fact that the power, the legitimate power, is in a way a genealogical power. It's related to the origin of the power, and the fact that it's related to people who wrote it, who built it, who played a role in this. So one of the conclusion is that what people call regime of historicity are related. The authority is related to this uh, uh, the idea of genealogy. And what is interesting is that the historicity was distinguishing the past experience, which were used to justify, to legitimate the authority, and also the future and the promise of the future, which, depending on the period, was very different in Christian period. So the idea of parousia was that in the future we will have an as a word, the completely different world, or maybe after in the modern societies, the idea is that you could build a just society or something like this. And so we can mention this idea, which was very fruitful, the notion of regime of historicity, which was the idea that people were taking the experience, they were they were building some projection of the future. They wanted to discuss this new world. So it's very interesting, and I refer here to Koselleck, who wrote many books on this kind of thing, and he tried to explain how in the past this regime of historicity were evolving, and that the modern regime of historicity was different than the medieval regime of historicity, and it was different from the regime of historicity in the antiquity. Now, what is interesting with the end of authority is that the legitimation of the power doesn't come from the origin, from the genealogy. And so I think this notion of hyper history, which is introduced by Luciano Ferruti, can be continued here by this notion of hyper historicity. And maybe you have some kind of new regime of historicity where the experience past is perceived in very different manner today, because we have some kind of pathology of memory with hypermnesia, because we have many things to remind. It's very difficult to recollect all things and to do some synthesis with this. But what is more interesting and more very important and very different is that in the past the future was some kind of promise of a better world, of promise and completely other world. And today one of the questions is that we have very difficult, a lot of difficulty to envisage the future. And what we would like to do is to make a future possible, not a dream, but just a future possible. And so maybe it's this kind of hyper historicity which are very interesting. And in conclusion, and this is, I think, an open question. I would like to pursue this kind of work, maybe with other people in this OnLife project. Is what is the regime of historicity? So, in other words, if this notion of regime of historicity was interesting in the past, and it was, if it explains the evolution of the world, I think that today we have a different regime of historicity, and this is the type of thing I would like to explore. So, thank you very much for your attention.